Hello and welcome to livealittlehigher.com. We continue learning Hodot HaLevavot, Duties of the Hearts with the Gate of Reflection by Rabbi Bahia Ibn Pakuda. And today he's talking about the divine wisdom which is evident in the demand for gold and silver. And this is a phenomenon you should reflect upon and from which you should discern traces of divine wisdom. And beneficence is that people agree to buy and sell in exchange for gold and silver. So it doesn't make sense, if you really reflect on it, it doesn't make sense that gold and silver are like precious things. Like, what determines that they're precious? Who said they're precious? So here we see that which they endeavor to accumulate, this derives from the Creator's care for his creatures, that their welfare be served. Like, for ages, silver and gold have been commodities. People have used it for jewels, for utensils, and they resemble a status of wealth, and people are attracted to them. So actually, because of this, they are expensive items. So the Creator cared for his creatures and that their welfare be served. In and of themselves, these metals serve no purpose. Like, you could have jewels made out of something else that is not so expensive. Or you could make earthware to serve your food. You don't need silverware. So it says here that, that for if someone suffers from hunger or thirst, for lack of food and drink, an abundance of gold and silver does him no good. And I remember there was a story once, I don't know if it's a real story or not a real story, about one of the Rothschilds. Someone asked him how rich he was, and he says, I'm gonna put it this way, I'm never gonna die of hunger. And it happened to be that one day he was in his safe, in his house. He went into his safe. It was a big room, and where he had all his wealth in that room, and the door locked on him. And he was locked inside of his safe for many, many days. And nobody could find him until someone actually thought about it and went in, and by the time they came in, he was already dead. Why? Because he could have been surrounded by all the gold and silver, but if he had no food to eat, nothing would save him. Even all the money in the world he had would not have saved him. So here it says that this is what Rabbi Pakuda is trying to explain to us. It does not meet his needs. If he suffers pain in one of his members of his body, gold and silver will not cure him. While other minerals are often used for medical purposes, silver and gold are not so much used for medical purposes. So one of the astounding signs of wisdom in regard to gold and silver is that while a few individuals possess large amounts of it, then they never running out of them, most people have only a little. Like, if you look at the worldwide population, people don't have a lot of gold and silver. No, in general, no. This is a commodity. So now if everyone possessed them in abundance, they would not be a commodity. They wouldn't be something that would be used as a currency, because they would lose their price. And because for obtaining what they desire, on one hand they are scarce, on the other hand they are plenty in value. On the one hand they are precious, on the other hand they are worthless, as in themselves they are of no use. And this is all part of the grand plan of the divine wisdom. And then he comes and tells us one of God's wonders, what is more vital is more available. And he starts talking about that if we meditate on this, that what is most necessary for us as human beings is what there's more about. Like, for example, human beings cannot live without air. And air is everywhere. You walk into your house, you have air to breathe. You walk outside in the street, you have air to breathe. Wherever you go, there's air to breathe, unless you go inside a pool, a swimming pool or the ocean, and you sink down and there's no air. But you can always stick your head out and you can always breathe. So something that is absolutely necessary for our survival is in abundance. Then we can see water. Water is also something that is less important than air, but we also need water to be able to survive. But we can go through 1 or 2 days without water and we will be able to survive. So water is less available than air, but nevertheless, it's something that there's a lot of it in the world, and most places don't have problems of drinking water. They have rivers, they have springs of water. Even the Jews in the desert had Miriam's well with them. So water is something that is in abundance and is something that is needed. So we see that it's less than the air, but nevertheless, it's something essential, something that you can find easily. Food, on the other hand, is also a necessity. People cannot survive without food. We need food to be able to be alive. So, but one can manage without it or find a substitute for it much more readily than is possible in case of air or water. So you can survive more days without food, but you can be drinking water. So here it says, consequently, food is harder to obtain. It's less available than water and air. But in the nonetheless abundant, also it's abundantly available, and human beings are never deprived of it altogether. There's an overly abundance of food in the world. If not, look at the restaurants here and see how much food they throw away. That there's people dying of hunger in other places of the world, it really doesn't make any sense, because there's no lack of food in the world. There's abundance of food. Everybody could be fed. There's no need to die of hunger. If people are dying of hunger, it's because governments are corrupt and they're stealing money from the people, and they're stealing money from organizations, and they're not feeding their people. But food is something that is also in abundance, less than air and water, but nevertheless you can always find food. The same applies to clothing made of skins, wool, or plants. Substitutes can be found for them more easily, and their availability is more limited than in the case of food. It takes a while to obtain them. This is because man can manage without them or make do with just a few of them. Like a person doesn't need to have 200 dresses hanging on the closet. Like you can have three dresses or 2 dresses, wash one, wear the other one, and go through it till they get ripped, and then you have another one. Clothing is less necessary than food, water, and air. Nevertheless, today in this world, there's an overabundance of clothing. You find clothing everywhere, but in the olden days, to get a garment wasn't so easily. You had to shave the sheep, weave the wool, do a lot of things until you could get a sweater or a dress. It wasn't like today that you walk into a store and you have 200 dresses to choose from. But in general, what it's telling us here is that the less necessary something is, the less abundance of it there is in the world. And so we see that Hashem, in his wisdom, is always taking care of us. He always gives us what we need. This also helps us to discern in our priorities what's really important for our survival, and to give precedence to what really matters. And in that way, we won't be a foolish and ignorant person, and we won't be people who are going to be with this feeling of deserving, that I deserve entitlement. On the other hand, we will be grateful people, and we'll never take these blessings for granted. We will always be grateful for all the abundance that Hashem gives us and how much care he takes into our survival. So I leave you with these reflections, and remember, live a little higher. Thank you.